Today, we are going to be talking about the very best anime gacha games available on mobile devices, iOS, Android, and even games that are playable on emulators. There are a lot of mobile games out there, and over the last year of this channel's existence, I have covered probably closing in on, if not exceeding 200 different titles total. And I feel as though with all of those games, I can definitely find 10 to list that are, in my opinion, subjectively the best anime gacha games in the genre right now. Again, this is going to be completely based off of games that I have played. Before we go any further though, did you know that we currently stream over on Twitch? If you're interested, come on over and join us. We stream every Tuesday, Saturday, and Sunday at 3 p.m. EST, and we would love to have you come on over and play with us. Now, I know that a few of you might actually disagree with one or more of the titles in this list, and that is perfectly fine, but do remember that this list is completely subjective. So if you have games that you think deserve to be in a list like this, I urge you to go down into the comment section below and let me know what those are. I'd love for you to let me know why you think that they deserve to be in a list like this, so I can go ahead and dedicate more time to playing them on the channel, or maybe I can go ahead and actually include them in a follow-up list next year. So with that in mind, let's just go ahead and jump right in. Let's start this off with what is perhaps the biggest release of 2020, Genshin Impact. This is a title that MMORPGs has dedicated probably over 30 hours to since it launched on Monday, and for good reason. The reason I'm listing this here is because it's probably the best cross-platform game that I have played between PC and mobile devices. Not only does it look absolutely incredible graphically, I haven't seen a game look better, but it also plays very, very well. Granted, the action combat is definitely simple, so it likely won't appeal to a large audience interested in more complex combat systems, but at the same time, mobile games aren't really known for their mechanically complex combat. Genshin Impact provides an enormous world for players to go out in and explore. It has tons of content to consume. It already has updates planned for the near future and has an incredibly deep, rich storyline. Fate Grand Order is one of the better RPGs out there and has what is arguably some of the better free, probably more fair gacha systems as well. As an RPG, the game utilizes a chapter-like form of progression. Instead of providing a large open world to explore, you move through chapters and missions, unlocking new levels, new fights, and the potential for new characters. There's a very deep story present in game, with probably more story than I have ever seen in a mobile game. No joke, I have mentioned having to skip bits of it in the past due to how much there is, which is more than fine. Granted, as storytelling is important, especially to me, but I mean, you know, there's such a thing as too much. Combat is also pretty good. There isn't any auto combat from what I recall, with players having to actually select what types of attacks you want to use and then attempting to chain them together. Plus, I mean, if you're a fan of the Fate series, then this will probably be a very solid title for you to go ahead and try. Azure Lane isn't your typical chapter-based RPG. Instead, well, yes, there are definitely chapters and missions per chapter. Each mission sends you off into a large grid where you can move both horizontally and vertically, doing battle with various enemies, with the ultimate goal appearing towards the end of the mission. This adds a little flavor to what would otherwise be very similar to the vast majority of games that already exist with this style. But the bulk of the game actually takes place in combat, where you move your ships, which are the waifus that you collect around, kinda like a bullet hell game, attempting to avoid enemy fire while dishing out attacks of your own in an attempt to sink their battleships. Yeah, I am being 100% serious here, and it is actually a lot of fun. Probably one of the games that I invested more time into on this channel. Exos Heroes is one of the better games out there. It's highly reminiscent of an old JRPG, with players capable of running around the large overworld between different areas, different zones, taking part in combat, and exploring what the world generally has to offer. As it is an RPG, you can bet that there's a lot of story, and there's a lot, no kidding. While I never had to skip any of it, it's worth noting that the story was actually very well done, with a lot of voice acting and surprisingly a lot of humor. There are chapters to progress through, but they're handled a little differently to how chapters are handled in normal mobile games. And the combat is really, really good. It's turn-based, with players selecting their abilities ahead of time and cycling through attack animations until one side, either you or the enemy, are ultimately dead. And the abilities look damn good. These are graphics, these are animations that I did not expect to see in a turn-based RPG like this, and honestly, I did not expect this game to be like this at all. I was pleasantly surprised, and I played through quite a bit of it. I never actually played Arknights. MRSSSTIX wanted to try it out earlier this year because she heard good things about it, and she ended up ultimately having a lot of fun in it and went ahead and did her dedicated video on the game. And she mentioned that if I were going to do a video like this, it definitely deserved to be included, as it's by far one of the only mobile games that she has probably enjoyed, other than Genshin Impact, which she's been playing almost every single day for about 8 hours per day since it launched. As you'd expect, there are chapters, there are missions, and a story to progress both. However, the bulk of the game takes place in combat, which takes the form of a grid that you're capable of deploying units to and engaging enemies on. Think something like Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy Tactics, I guess, but more in real time. There's a lot of grind to it, but from what I saw, MRSSSTIX actually unlocked quite a few characters, both male and female, without spending a single cent. And she was of the opinion that the gacha system wasn't bad at all. Maybe not necessarily good, but definitely not bad. I mean, can you guys even name a gacha game with a good gacha system present? Lord of Heroes is definitely a newer title, and I swear, mobile games are actually continuing to get better over time. Lord of Heroes is the first and only type of game of its kind that I have found. Not only is it absolutely beautiful, by far one of the best looking games on mobile devices right now, but it's a tactical RPG like Dynasty Warriors or Samurai Warriors. There are chapters and missions, sure, but your ultimate goal here is to progress horizontally across the map, conquering and forging alliances with other regions. This can drastically alter the outcome of your game depending on what course of action you choose to go with. It also affects which characters you can potentially recruit. While a lot of the game definitely also takes place in combat, thankfully the combat itself is very well done. Visually, it's beautiful with stunning backdrops and gorgeous attack animations. It's also turn-based, which is something that I honestly prefer my RPGs to be. There's also quite a deep story to progress through that furthers the game, which once again has us, the ruler of your very own nation, seeking to dominate the rest of the country and therefore the world. This is the only game that I have ever made it to Endgame in on a mobile device. I hit chapter 9 shortly before chapter 10 was released, and my god did it take a while. Which was perfectly fine, honestly. I love the fact that it has such a detailed story that spans so many chapters and is still updated so thoroughly years after it was released. This is a gorgeous game with an equally if not better combat system than its graphical style though. While you can definitely allow for the game to autoplay for you, it's not going to be possible to take a hands-off approach to progression, as unless you're adequately CCing the bosses and utilizing your kit to your utmost, you're likely going to see yourself failing quite quickly. Combat is real time, with your characters running horizontally to engage enemies and the ability to click through your abilities on a global cooldown. I've only ever played Epic 7 through once, and I did not get nearly as far as I perhaps should have, but it remains, in my opinion, one of the best looking games that I have ever played on my phone. And that is purely due to the fact that the character models look absolutely, undoubtedly, unquestionably amazing. At its core, it is about what you'd expect. You have chapters, you have missions, you run them as you normally would. There's a pretty good story to it from what I could tell, and ultimately, there is plenty to do and plenty to explore. The combat is also very, very good. You have the option on fielding several different characters at once, each with their own abilities that you're capable of cycling through. Combat animations and even the in-game character models look great, and the majority of the game seemingly takes place running horizontally for the plot, for the missions you take. Honkai Impact 3rd, much like Genshin Impact, is one of the better titles on the platform. Not only are characters absolutely gorgeous, not only is the world stunning to look at, but it also has some of the best combat in the genre. And honestly, even after Genshin Impact launched, my opinion remains much the same. Honkai Impact has much better combat than Genshin Impact and still has some of the best combat that I have played through in an anime game, better than a lot of PC titles even. Much like the majority of RPGs, Honkai Impact has various chapters and missions to progress through, unlocking new areas, new story, new characters. Thankfully though, the missions you go on normally involve having you run through various zones, each filled with a plethora of monsters to kill and puzzles to solve. I'd honestly classify it closer to something like a hub RPG than anything, but that's just me. And finally, Girls Frontline, yet another interesting take on the RPG genre. One of the best parts of this game is that as your characters actually take damage, their gear continues to progressively break down further and further until, well, you'll have to play the game to really get a proper gauge of how good or bad, depending on how you look at things, it gets. This is a very addictive game though, as while it utilizes chapters and missions, the bulk of the game takes place on large maps that allow for you to move around, either fighting enemies or collecting goodies. Combat is pretty basic. Your characters auto-fight enemies, and you have the option of selecting from a unique skill specific to that character, making it integral to set up your parties correctly, as I've lost battles more than once because, well, I just wasn't very good at the game, admittedly. And they're what I believe to be the 10 top anime gacha games out of the over 200 or so that I have played through over the course of the last year. That might change next year though, when more games come out, or heck, when I play through more games, because there are a lot out there that I still have not touched and that I need to make my way through over the course of the next year. But again, this list is purely subjective after all. Now, what is your favorite anime gacha game, or rather, what are your favorite anime gacha games, plural? Let me know down in the comments below. Who knows, you might end up helping someone out that's interested in something that you're interested in, that you share common interests with. Anyway guys, that is it for me. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you guys next time.
Someday soon, I'm gonna make it.